To a 5D entity, our 3D timeline would not be experienced as a sequence of now moments, but as a solid, static, and navigable object, often referred to in physics as a world tube or a block universe. While we perceive time as a river we are swept along, a 5D being sees it as a direction. Just as we can look at a mountain range and see the beginning, middle, and end of a trail simultaneously, they see your birth, your present, and your death as a single continuous structure. Your entire existence would look like a long, tangled fiber stretching through the fourth dimension. They would see the Earth not as a spinning ball, but as a solid spiral wrapping around the sun over billions of years. If the fourth dimension is a single line of time, the fifth dimension is the plane containing all possible versions of that timeline. A 5D being could see the different outcomes of a single event simultaneously, like seeing a quantum circuit in every possible state of entanglement at once. They could sidestep from one 4D timeline into another. To them, what if is not a thought experiment, but a physical direction they can move toward. From this perspective, the distinction between matter and information disappears. They would see the movement of quantum data, like the interactions within a quantum chip or the gravitational pull of a black hole, as visible currents flowing between different layers of the matrix. The stars wouldn't just be distant lights. They would be massive nodes of energy connected by invisible data streams of gravity and light that have existed for eons. To a 5D creature, your life would not be a series of now moments, but a single solid physical object. Here is how that entity would perceive your existence through the layers of a 5D matrix. Instead of seeing you as a person in one place at one time, they see your entire journey from birth to death as a long, undulating tube or thread stretched across the fourth dimension time. Every location you have ever stepped in is part of this one solid shape. Just as you can see a whole mountain range at once, they see your past, present, and future simultaneously. Your childhood and your old age are just different coordinates on the same 5D map. Because they possess a fifth dimension, the probability or state layer, they don't just see the life you lived. They see the shadows of every choice you almost made, representing a vast field of branching paths and alternate realities all existing at once. They would see the quantum entanglement stream, the way your thoughts, actions, and biological data interact with the Earth and the stars, as visible currents of information flowing through the matrix. To them, you are not a temporary being, but a permanent, shimmering architecture of data etched into the fabric of the universe. If a 5D creature passed through our 3D space, we wouldn't see their full form any more than a drawing on a flat piece of paper could see a 3D human. We would only see a 3D cross-section, a slice of their 5D geometry. Here is how that glimpse might manifest to our 3D senses. As the entity moves through the fifth dimension, the slice of them that intersects with our 3D world would appear to change shape, size, and density instantly. Like a shifting blob. Imagine pushing a 3D sphere through a 2D sheet of paper. To the 2D people on the paper, the sphere would first appear as a tiny dot, grow into a large circle, and then shrink back to a dot before vanishing. A 5D being might appear to us as a shimmering, translucent volume that expands, contracts, or changes its physical properties like temperature or luminosity, as they rotate through dimensions we cannot perceive. Because they exist outside of our linear time, their presence might look like a glitch in the matrix. You might see multiple versions of the same entity simultaneously, representing different moments in their time. They might appear to be in two places at once, reflecting the quantum superposition that is a natural part of their 5D state. Since a 5D matrix incorporates a value field or information layer, their body might not look like flesh and bone at all. We might perceive them as a dense cluster of quantum data flows, geometric patterns of light and energy that seem to pulsate with information. The slice we see could look like a localized storm of gravitational or electromagnetic waves, because we are only seeing the 3D footprint of their 5D mass. If you were looking at them while working on a project, you might feel as though the entity is observing every line of your code and every weather data point simultaneously, because to them, your entire workstation is just a thin, transparent layer of their larger reality. To us, they would be a terrifying, beautiful, and utterly confusing anomaly, a piece of a higher logic briefly appearing in our limited 3D view. The idea that ball lightning could be a slice of a higher dimensional entity or phenomenon is a fascinating bridge between fringe physics and multidimensional theory. If we apply the logic of a 5D matrix, ball lightning fits several characteristics of a 3D cross-section passing through our reality. Just as a 3D object appearing in a 2D world would start as a point and expand, ball lightning often appears or disappears abruptly, which could represent a 5D object rotating into or out of our spatial coordinates. Its tendency to float, bounce, or move against the wind could be seen as the entity moving along a fifth-dimensional axis, the value field or probability layer, making its 3D footprint appear to defy our local laws of physics. The intense luminosity and electromagnetic interference associated with ball lightning align with how we might perceive a high-concentration quantum data flow or a gravitational curvature layer from the matrix. Reports of ball lightning passing through solid walls without damage could be explained by a higher dimensional object stepping over our 3D barriers, much like you can step over a line drawn on a floor that a 2D being would see as an impassable wall. If you've seen quantum computing videos, you've likely seen how particles can exist in a state of superposition. To a 5D observer, ball lightning might not be a thing at all, but rather a brief, energetic intersection where a 5D probability field touches our specific 3D timeline. Do you think the humming or hissing sounds often reported with ball lightning could be the sensory translation of quantum data moving through our atmosphere? If we approach ball lightning or a similar anomaly as a 5D entity passing through our 3D space, we have to look at the mathematical projection of higher dimensional manifolds. In a 5D matrix, the position of an object is defined by 5 coordinates, x, y, z, t, v, where t is time and v represents a value or state dimension. When a 5D object intersects our 3D slice, we are essentially performing a dimensional reduction. Mathematically, this is similar to taking a 3D sphere and looking at its intersection with a 2D plane. For a 5D entity, its surface exists as a 4-manifold. As it moves through our 3D space, the intersection we perceive follows a cross-sectional function. If the entity rotates in the value aka 5th dimension, the 3D shape appears to change its volume or topology instantly, even if the 5D object itself is static. Because we only see a shell of their mass, they would appear as a glowing, non-solid volume, exactly like the plasma-like appearance of ball lightning. Imagine a standard 2D chart where the x-axis is time and the y-axis is space. To a 5D being, there is a z-axis of probability. Let's call them point A and point B. Point A, you are writing code for an API. Point B, you chose to go for a walk instead. The 5D view, both A and B are visible simultaneously as different branches in the 5th dimension. The 5D being can see the thickness of your timeline based on how many probabilities are clustered together. In quantum circuits, we deal with superposition. A 5D being is, in essence, a macro-scale version of a quantum state. The value dimension, or V, can be modeled as a scalar field. When ball lightning appears, we may be witnessing a peak intensity where the 5D field intersects our 3D coordinates. The hissing or humming reported is likely the 3D frequency translation of 5D data movement. If this entity is navigating our world, it isn't moving through the air. It is rotating its 5D mass so that a different slice of itself becomes visible in our 3D space. To us, it looks like a ball of light darting across a room. To them, it's like sliding a finger across a table. The concept of a 5D entity passing through a 3D wall, or ball lighting traveling through a wall without burning, it is best understood through spatial dimensionality theory, similar to how a 3D being would interact with a 2D flatland. In a 5D matrix, the wall is not a solid barrier that occupies all dimensions. It is merely a thin sheet that exists at specific coordinates in the 3D spatial basis, x, y, and z. To us, a wall is an impassable obstacle because our movement is restricted to 3 dimensions. However, for a 5D entity, time t and state or value v are spatial directions they can physically navigate. A wall is a locked door to us, but in 5D the wall only exists at a specific timestamp and probability state. The entity doesn't push through the atoms of the wall. Instead, it steps into the 5th dimension. The value field moves around the coordinates where the wall exists in 3D space, and then re-enters our 3D slice on the other side. There are 2 primary scientific frameworks that support this navigational behavior. First, we will look at quantum tunneling. In quantum mechanics, particles can pass through energy barriers that should be impassable according to classical physics. If ball lightning is a macro-scale quantum entanglement stream, it may be utilizing a similar wave function property, where its position is a probability distribution across the 5D matrix, rather than a fixed 3D point. Next, Kaluza-Klein theory. This mathematical framework suggests that if a fifth dimension exists, electromagnetism is actually gravity acting in that higher dimension. Ball lightning, being highly electromagnetic, could represent a localized warp, where the fifth dimension becomes accessible, allowing the entity to bypass 3D matter by traveling through the higher dimensional curvature. Imagine a 2D ant living on a piece of paper with a line drawn across it. To the ant, that line is an infinite wall. If you, a 3D being, lift your finger, move it across the line in the air, and touch the paper on the other side, the ant sees you teleport or pass through the wall. You didn't break the line, you simply used the third dimension height to move through a space the ant cannot perceive. For a 5D entity, our 3D solid world is as thin as that paper. They move through the probability and time layers like we move through a room, making walls irrelevant to their trajectory. If we look at these anomalies as 5D entities, their visits wouldn't be motivated by physical travel, but by informational resonance within the 5D matrix. In a 5D model where time and probability are physical landscapes, an entity doesn't just show up. It intersects with a specific 3D coordinate because that point in time and space has a high value field density. Just as a mass creates a gravity well in 3D, complex data structures or high-energy events create attractors in 5D. In quantum physics, the act of observation changes the state of a particle. A 5D entity might visit an individual because they are acting as an active node in the quantum data stream. To a being that sees your entire life thread as a single object, a visit isn't a random event. They might be intersecting with your current now because of its relationship to a future point in your timeline that is significant in the probability field. From their perspective, they are simply standing still at a coordinate where your world tube happens to be particularly vibrant or loud in the fifth dimension. In this framework, the visit is less like a guest coming to your house and more like two signals on a radio dial finally overlapping. Looking through the lens of quantum information science, we have to look at the ball lightning not as a thing, but as a coherent information state navigating a multi-layered system. If we describe it shedding code, while passing through solid matter, we are describing a high-level quantum state transfer between dimensions. In standard 3D physics, a wall is a potential energy barrier. For a subatomic particle, tunneling is a statistical probability where it appears on the other side of a barrier without going through it. The 5D interpretation: a 5D entity doesn't tunnel in the traditional sense. It utilizes its spatial degree of freedom in the fifth dimension, the value field or V. To us, glass is a solid molecular lattice. To the entity, the window is a set of coordinates that only exist in our specific 3D slice. By shifting its phase in the fifth dimension, it steps over the window's spatial coordinates in the matrix, essentially performing a non-local transition. What we perceive as shedding code is a process called environmental decoherence. As a 5D being, the entity is in a state of pure information, a complex superposition of all its possible states. As it passes through the noisy 3D environment of your house, it interacts with the local matter, the air, the wall, the electricity in the outlet. This interaction causes its 5D wave function to leak information into our 3D world. Those streams of code are the measurement outcomes of its 5D data stream, collapsing into 3D readable bits. You aren't seeing sparks. You are seeing the quantum error correction data or the parity bits of its higher dimensional existence being shed as it maintains its internal stability. The reason this entity would know a lineage as it passed through is due to topological quantum memory. In quantum computing, information can be stored in the braiding or knots of particles. Your heritage isn't just history, it is a specific braid of information in the time and state dimensions. Storms are massive generators of electromagnetic noise and plasma. In QIS terms, the storm acts as a pump field. The electrical outlet provides the voltage needed to lower the barrier between the 5D matrix and our 3D slice. Much like Trinity and Neo used telephone, in other words electromagnetism, acoustics, and signal transmissions to travel in the matrix, The 5D entity uses the high-energy environment of the storm as a carrier signal to navigate through the resistance of our physical world. If we extend the 5D matrix model to standard lightning, we can view a bolt not just as an atmospheric discharge, but as a high-speed data synchronization event. While ball lightning appears as a stable, navigating entity, regular lightning would be the carrier signal that bridges the higher dimensional layers to our 3D reality. Standard lightning represents a massive, near-instantaneous release of energy, averaging between 200 megajoules and 7 gigajoules. In our 5D framework, regular lightning is a write/sync operation. It is the high-energy bridge that creates the channel for information to move between the Earth and the broader cosmic matrix. Ball lightning is a localized program. It is a coherent packet of data, a vortex of plasma and information that remains after the main bolt writes its data to the ground. Recent scientific breakthroughs have discovered that entangled light can carry complex topological structures reaching up to 48 dimensions. If we view the electromagnetic radiation of lightning through this lens, a single bolt isn't just electricity. It's a high-dimensional alphabet for encoding and protecting stable quantum information. When lightning strikes, it may be transferring massive amounts of state data across the value field, with the flash being the 3D visible artifact of this multidimensional transfer. The intense heat and electromagnetic intensity of a lightning strike up to 30,000 degrees C create a hole in our standard 3D physics. If lightning is a data transfer event, then ball lightning emerging from an outlet is like a retrieved file being opened in your home. In short, if ball lightning is the 5D being itself, regular lightning is the portal it uses to step into our 3D world. Now let's bridge evolutionary biology, linguistics, and higher dimensional physics to explore whether what we perceive as life and language are actually localized interfaces for a 5D cosmic intelligence. You probably are already aware that birds are taxonomically avian dinosaurs, the only lineage to survive the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction. Many species like lyribirds or corvids produce clicks, metallic rattles, and electric zaps. From a 5D matrix perspective, these aren't just sounds, they are frequency-encoded data. If dinosaurs and birds have functioned as biological sensors for millions of years, their mechanical vocalizations might be a legacy of interacting with the Earth's electromagnetic field. They may be biological hardware tuned to the same frequencies that ball lightning, the 5D entity, utilizes to navigate our 3D slice. The theory that ancient Hebrew and related Semitic scripts functions as a functional source code for reality is a cornerstone of both mysticism and some modern information theories. But if you look at Paleo-Hebrew or Phoenician characters, they resemble schematics, logical gates, resistors, and flow paths. If the universe is a 5D matrix, then the word isn't a metaphor. It is the machine code the Hebrew script used to render the 3D GUI our physical world. It is the layered, quantum, multidimensional, mathematical expression meaning of Genesis, when God said, "Let there be light." In many traditions, Malach angel literally means messenger. An angel is a 5D data packet crossing into 3D. They appear as wheels within wheels, Ezekiel's vision, or beings of light, which perfectly describes a 5D manifold rotating through our space. Of course, the real term might have been as we see them with our eyes when we see them. An angle of light. Of course, it is possible it is a 5D predator. A predator doesn't always want to eat your body. Sometimes it wants to harvest your state data. If an entity is a predator, it might feed on the complexity of your timeline. Though certainly they may be neither friend nor foe, but simply the maintenance routines of the matrix. When a bird clicks, when a shortwave radio station like 15,770 kHz pulses, and when ball lightning hisses, you are hearing the decoherence of the 5D matrix. The sound of the matrix, it is the sound of 5D logic being downsampled into 3D audio. If you want to support Wendy's efforts, hire Wendy, or donate to her multiple sclerosis fund, check out the links in the description box. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it throughout dimensions with your friends. Wishing you blessings, peace, love, light, and kittens. Later days.